So I saw this post about somebody trying to create a concave cup with a collision for the purpose of using physics to roll a die in Godot. And it started this conversation about uh, possible optimization issues using concave or tri-mesh uh, shapes in Godot for collisions. I'm not 100% sure if the warning there was around using concave shapes for rigid bodies as opposed to static bodies. Um, so if that optimization concern is really only about rigid bodies, then this whole example that I did is kind of pointless. Definitely let me know. But I have this pretty complex, weird octopus gumball machine, and I want to drop gumballs, marbles, little round tokens in here, and I want them to go through the hoses and end up in this bigger section. So a use case like this, to me at least, seems far more difficult to configure with just a handful of more simple, primitive convex shapes. There's potentially some like hacky stuff I could do, like just set up some simple collisions like this where the items are actually going to be rolling down and call it good, bing bong boom, right? Something like that maybe would be feasible. Even that, I mean, it seems challenging to do that. So I came up with a couple of different solutions for this. So one of the solutions is to go the simple concave route, and in this case, this is actually more complicated because I don't necessarily need all of these additional faces. I could just have a simple concave shape to represent just the interior, like this. Where is it? Let me go back into, okay, it's not showing up in the other mode for some reason. I don't actually know why. Because if I interrogate the viewport display, yeah, it's display as textured, so I don't really know what's going on. Doesn't matter. But this is something I could also do is, rather than having a quote unquote watertight surface, we really just care about the surface normals. So I could do this, import it as a tri-mesh, and do, I think, backface, enable backface. I'm not going to talk about this though. I did a test with this and it was basically comparable. So what I ended up testing with is this concave shape that is quote unquote watertight, and then this monstrosity right here. So these are all simple convex shapes, and I actually used a combination of a Blender extension called Convex Decomposition with this solver slash algorithm that takes complicated concave forms and rebuilds them using lots of simple convex primitives. So I saw this and I was like, there's no way this is going to be more optimal than just my simple convex or a concave solution. And spoiler alert, it is not better. Again, the caveat here is this is a static body. I think users in the thread were urging the original poster to use simple concave shapes. So this kind of blows it out of the water. Obviously, there's a ton here. I also fed this through a decimate modifier. I fed everything through a decimate modifier to try and make this geometry more simple. It was actually quite a bit more wild than that. But anyways, here's what it looks like in Godot land. So I got, in this case, these two static bodies here that are currently visible. These are my simple concave shapes. Those are these guys right here. Simple watertight concave shapes. So these are, yeah, I think these are technically tri-meshes. I'm using a Godot extension in here. Tri-mesh, concave. I assume that those are really talking about the same thing. Could be wrong, let me know. But they're concave polygon shapes. And you see that those are indeed the watertight ones that we were just looking at. So if I run this and take a look at the profiler, again, I'm not a well, I don't know if I said this already. I'm not an expert with using the profiler, but what I'm looking for is once I start this, take a look at physics 3D. It makes sense to me that this would be the physics 3D thread slash process that's that would be causing these performance issues, right? So it's done. Let's stop it. I do have this spike here, which I don't always see this. I'm going to ignore this. This is an outlier. I haven't actually seen something like this before. So I'm going to use kind of the rolling average, which the average is about, 8 milliseconds for these uh, simple watertight concave shapes. And then the other thing here, so I can make a dance, which is pretty cool. Not relevant. Actually, might be relevant just to do some additional kind of stress testing. So let's reset it. Clear, 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 stop, reset, clear, start. Start this. Take a look at physics. Let's make it dance. You see some are getting stuck. But also notice that nothing is getting lost in the sauce, right? Nothing is clipping through. I think that's in part because it is this watertight shape. I think it's more because of I have continuous collision detection enabled on the shape. There's no physics materials set on either of, on either the static body or the actual collectible that I'm using. That's what, from what I noticed, the biggest performance hit, honestly. So if I load this material here, I lowered the friction. The idea here is it's not going to clog the pipes anymore. You know what I'm saying? So if I run this again, we were seeing about what, like 7.8 milliseconds. Still getting 240 FPS. I'm on a top end machine, so not really good baseline. I'm sure there's lots of caveats, and yes, this is fine as long as blah, 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 right? I run this again, physics 3D. Let's make everybody dance. And I don't have dampening on the angular velocity, so yeah, it's really cooking. So what I would do if I were going to disable friction is, I have logic set up so that these eventually go to sleep after like 15 seconds. But what I would probably also do, yeah, so you see it's a jump up for sure. The average is definitely more than we were seeing, right? Like this one's 9.6. So, okay, that's concave, right? So I'm going to go back, undo this. And now let's take a look at the monstrosity that is the many simple convex collisions. So static bodies, you can see. Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. These are concave. Well, there's your problem. So I actually have this flag trimesh D. So I am marking these as concave. So if we go back through, I'm actually going to make them simple convex shapes. I'm going to add that collision across the board, discard this mesh, bing, bong, boom. I'm going to call this concave. And you can see now simple D. So hopefully it works this time. So now if we bounce back over here and grab that latest file, concave, slap that on in. And what do we got? Okay, after a bit of massaging, I was able to get these imported as convex polygon shapes. I think there's some weirdness with the fact that I had these actually as children of empties just to try and keep it organized. But it wasn't importing as expected, so that's okay. I got these imported. So these are now, should be convex polygon shapes that basically make up my concave form. So there's a lot going on here. I don't even have to move these. I do just want to do this though. I'm just going to grab all of these and use the same collision groups. So they're not looking for collisions at all, but other things are detecting them for collisions. So the collectibles are looking at layer 2 for collisions. So now it should basically be a comparable test to the simple concave shapes I had. So now if we run this again, ignore that debugger. That is unrelated. That's because I'm not running my Nakama server, which is fine. So we go back, let's clear this out, start cooking, start it. And interesting, so let me make him dance a little bit. Losing some. That's one way to unclog the pipes. So when they're dancing, they're jumping up. But if you saw, yeah, so they're jumping up to about 7, 6, 7. I'm going to reset it, clear this, start it, start this, and just see, natively when they're falling through, what it looks like. So you can see things are getting stuck because I don't have friction lowered. And I think there is actually a difference, right, of about 4 milliseconds. To me, that's negligible. I'd be more concerned with possible CPU overhead of having this many additional static bodies. It's also just easier for me as a developer to just have a simple concave shape. Maybe this would stack up over time if I had lots of these objects. But yeah, so definitely a difference. If I go back to the original one, so let's hide these, go back to the concave shapes and start this again. Start the profiler, start this. Yeah, I mean, okay, so now look at it, right? Like with the concave shapes again, it's also back down. So yeah, I don't know. Seems negligible to me, at least in this context, where this is a static body as opposed to a rigid body. Let's just make it dance again. There's too much friction. There's too much friction. Someone's got to take some, oh, I didn't even know the constipation medication. I can't even make that joke. All right. Oh, one other interesting thing, or I think is interesting, is the value of continuous collision detection. So if I turn that off, go back here, let's start this again, and look now what happens when I make these dance. You should see some clipping, yeah. So every time I apply a random impulse on one of these, I end up getting some that clip through like that. And it's not as bad as it would be, I think, if this were just a simple concave shape with back face collision enabled. If that were the case, then this clipping would be pretty crazy. So curious what your takeaway is, but to me, the difference between at least this example using lots of simple primitive convex shapes like this, as opposed to many, or as opposed to, a limited number of concave shapes like this, or rather like this, the difference seems negligible. Again, in this case.